everyone and welcome to another video. This is all of my pickups for the second half of August. Mainly manga. There's a figure I want to show off as well, but almost entirely new releases. Unlike last video, there's a lot of manga, but it's not going to be to the level of last video just because of me getting all my proxy stuff, but with this plus last pickups video, I got so much manga this month. So rather than spend too much time, I'm just going to get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first up is the figure, and it's maybe a little bit unexpected. It's the Toyworks 1/8 Victor scale. I know a lot of people didn't really like this figure. I think I think he looks a lot better in person. There are definitely angles he looks better in, but he's not like atrocious. And personally, I really prefer this figure compared to some of the other figures of him currently, mainly the Mega House one and I think Kotobukiya. Is that the one where he's sitting? The Yuri Katsuki one has just been put onto pre-orders. I don't think I'm going to pre-order him right away. This one was not a pre-order. I got him after the fact, and unfortunately, because Toyworks isn't really regarded as like a high-end figure maker, although their prices are sort of in line with the Good Smiles and the Kotobukiyas, his price really like halved, which is why I picked him up now. So I got him for about half price, and I'm really happy with him. I like the dynamic pose, I like the outfit choice. I just really like how Toyworks has done this figure. I know not everyone is a fan of their figures, but I have the free boys from them as well, Makoto Haru and Rin, and I used to have Sosuke, and I think those are really well done as well. I mean, I wasn't expecting like Good Smile or Alter quality with these, and I am hoping to still get the Good Smile release of the main, like, Victor and Yuri if they ever put them out. But for now, I really like this one. If you've seen the two figures together, they're sort of reaching for each other, which I really like. Paired figures that come with two characters or that come separately but are meant to be like displayed together or paired together. So yeah, I actually really like this one. He is very cheap currently. I mean, his current price is probably the valued price that a lot of people would be willing to pay for him. And the sculpt is actually lovely. I don't have an issue with his hair. That was another one that people disliked, the hair and the face, but I really don't have a problem with it. I think he looks really good. But yeah, it's been a while since I picked up like a proper figure, or a figure at all. So it was nice to finally pick him up and add him to the collection, and I'm gotta make some room now for him. So first for manga, I have some older releases. Both of these are ex-library, so they're not in the most perfect of conditions. I got these from Better World Books, but that is Volume 4 and Volume 5 of The Key to the Kingdom by Kyoko Shito. This was originally put out by CMX. It's a 6-volume like shoujo fantasy series that I've been interested in for a while. I do have 2 other volumes on order, I think Volume 1 and 2, and so I just need to hunt down 3 and 6. They're not super expensive. They're quite easy to find. This isn't a super hard to find series if you're willing to buy secondhand. But yeah, I am really interested in starting this one. It looks really cool. And I've heard pretty good things about it. I think I've said this before, but I think CMX is a bit of an underrated publisher. They put out a lot of really weird and interesting manga whilst they were still, you know, publishing things. I have probably a handful or so of titles that they put out. Emma was one of their titles that they had before Yen Press relicensed it, but I also have Moonchild. I used to have my Chikyu Misaki, something along those lines. Yeah, I haven't read a huge amount of their stuff, but everything that I've looked into sounds really interesting. And this one, the premise was something I was really interested in, and I found 4 out of the 6 volumes for quite cheap on Better World Books, so I decided to pick them up whilst I had the chance. Next for manga, this is new stuff, although technically new stuff. We have some more of the Banana Fish reprints, so we have Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6. So I bought those 3 together, and then Volume 7, Volume 8, and Volume 9 was a separate order, so I am roughly halfway through the series. It's 19 volumes in all. Like with a lot of these older Viz titles, because this did just get a reprint. It wasn't polished up for the reprints or anything else. There are like the odd grammar or spelling error. There's a lot of like inconsistency with translation. So it's not like a perfect manga release, but I do think that the strength of the story, it regardless is worth reading. It's wonderful, wonderful manga. I've read all of these volumes. Volume 9 left on a really big cliffhanger, so I'm waiting for volume 10, 11, 12 to come in. I have made the order, but Book Depository sometimes takes a little while to get these books in and then shipped out. The interesting thing I noted is these 4 books are the newer imprint. You can tell because of the Viz Media logo here compared to the older one, and then just shoujo there. And again, sort of this is sort of the older Viz logo now, but compared to this one, it's a lot newer. So these first 2 books are actually the original print run from 2003, 2004, and then these, of course, are the 2018 reprints. But in these books, I found it interesting that this isn't in these new books, but how they were marketing shoujo at the time. Like manga appealing to both female and male readers, exciting stories with true-to-life characters and the thrill of exotic locales, and connecting the heart and mind through real human relationships. And I think that's like a really interesting perspective of like how shoujo was marketed at the time, because manga really wasn't a huge industry like it was now, and especially for shoujo. It was a little bit harder to encourage people to read it, and I think still now a lot of people have a perception of shoujo. So yeah, I just found it really interesting. Really, really, really phenomenal series. If you're not watching the anime on like Amazon Prime, check it out. It's really good. We just reached like volume 7. Parts of volume 7 in the most recent episode, which is episode 9. Yeah, it's great. It's absolutely wonderful, especially if you like sort of larger conspiracy, mystery, gang related stories. It's really good. Continuing with Viz manga, I don't know if I showed this off last video. I don't think I did, but if I did, my apologies. Volume 2 of the Full Metal edition of Full Metal Alchemist, Hiromu Arakawa's sort of smash hit classic action shonen. One of my favorite shonen, sort of full stop, of all time. I adore this series. I make no secret of that. It was one of my first anime series that I ever watched, and it's been near and dear to my heart ever since. These books are wonderful. I would highly, highly recommend this version of the story if you are a fan, to pick them up. Just the quality of them are lovely. And interestingly, a lot of like the biggest argument or the biggest downside of these books was that they didn't have the 4 coma like jokes at the end that Arakawa put in. We are getting a separate volume that collects all of those, and not just from the volumes but from various DVD inserts and other such things, so that's really exciting. I believe it's going to be the same trim sizes as these books, but I don't think it'll be hardcover. So, you know, if you are a fan and you're worried about that aspect of it and you're hanging on to your singles for that reason, I personally don't see the need, but, you know, maybe that will change your mind. Who knows? It's a wonderful story. I don't think it really needs any introduction. If you haven't tried it, definitely do, because it is one that I think deserves a lot of its like accolades or reputation. It's one that I think most people will enjoy for various reasons, and it really has something for everyone. The characters are great, the writing is great, the setting is really fun and interesting, the conflict is really compelling, and it just continues. It doesn't really ever have like a downside, like a slow part. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic manga. I'm so glad that we are getting these like Kanzenban or Full Metal editions. They're beautiful books being put out by Viz, and it's nice to see such a deserving manga get such a wonderful release. Next is some Kodansha manga. We have the newest volume of Tokyo Tarareba Girls by Akiko Higashimura. So the newest series by the Princess Jellyfish creator. And like her previous series available in English, I love this series. It's funny and like painfully relatable. It's about 3 women who are in their like early/mid 30s who feel like they've, I don't want to say missed the boat, because that's not quite the tone of it, but they are slowly realizing that like they feel like they're being left behind, or they haven't achieved much, and the issues in like how they see themselves because of that, how society sees them, like the perspective of everyone around them, and then their own perception of like why hasn't this happened to me? Why am I being left out, sort of thing. It's really, really good. I think Higashimura has a wonderful way of addressing certain issues, personal issues and societal issues, with like biting accuracy, but in a really dark, like black humor way. It's dark and somewhat depressing, but at the same time, like incredibly witty and relatable, and that's what makes it funny, because it is that reflection of self. Yeah, it's a really great manga. This sort of is the aftermath, the direct aftermath after the first volume. The series was previously released completely via digital, like Kindle editions by Kodansha, and then obviously sold enough or was popular enough to get this print edition later down the line. Really happy we are getting this one in print. I did buy the first 6 or so volumes in Kindle edition, so I've read quite a bit of this. This isn't anything really new for me, but if you are a fan of her work, if you're looking for some more involved josei that isn't just like, I don't know, like office lady romance, although there is aspects of that in this. It's really fun, funny, painfully true, and just one I think that most people can enjoy, especially if you are a josei fan and looking for some more variety within the genre. Then we have the most recent volume of To Your Eternity, volume 6. This is the end of the sort of arc that was set up in the last volume. And then we are getting into another one with the next volume. This is a great series. I've said it pretty much from the beginning. It does take a little while to sort of figure out where the series, like the direction of the series and the motivation. But as it continues, I think it gets better and better. It is a little bit like episodic insofar as each volume pretty much has like a self-contained story and then we move on to something else. It isn't chapter to chapter episodic, but just how the story functions lends itself to this continuing passage of time and turnover of characters. So yeah, I do keep up to date with this one via Crunchyroll's Manga app, as well as these volumes. If you're a fan of Yoshitoka Oima's other work, A Silent Voice, this is, of course, more like fantastical. It's not grounded in the reality that A Silent Voice was, but I think a lot of the themes are very similar, or it definitely has the same atmosphere for parts. It's definitely one to keep an eye out for. I think that Oima has a really interesting way of how she writes like relationships and understanding other people, and that's really at the forefront of this manga. So if you enjoyed that aspect of A Silent Voice, this would probably be to your liking. 2 for 2, Oima has done a great job. I am looking forward to reading the rest of the series, because there really is a lot of potential to go a lot of different directions. The possibilities are endless, and we'll just have to find out when we get there. And then finally for Kodansha, we have the most recent volume of Again, volume 4 by Misoro Kubo. This volume really shook up what I expected from this series. And I mean that in a really good way. I was already loving this series. I think that Kubo has a really fun sense of humor. She's a great mangaka. She has a wonderful sense of like movement, and her comic, like how she actually structures her comics are so fluid and just organic, and her characters really utilize the comic format with their like outrageous expressions and how they interact with each other and react to each other. I love her work, but this particular volume really changes something. I don't want to spoil it, but if you've been enjoying it thus far, I think this volume will surprise you, but in a good way. And I think it opens up the series to a lot more interesting stuff now. This series has been finished for a long time. It is 12 volumes long, so we are only roughly a third through. But I cannot wait to read more. I'm sure plenty of people know what happens. I don't read scan, so I have no idea. But I'm really keen for the next volume. This one was really like surprisingly good, and that was me going into it knowing that I would enjoy it. So yeah, it's just continued to get better and better and better. I can't wait for more. I'm looking forward to volume 5. On to Vertical, we have the most recent volume of Devil's Line, Volume 11, a series that I have been singing praises about since Volume 1 came out years ago now, it feels like. It's a wonderful series, and it is ending very, very soon. I think it has 3 or 4 chapters left, and then it was getting like, I don't know whether it's a sequel or a spin-off, but it's getting a single volume continuation after it ends at the end of the year. I'm going to be sad when it's over, and I don't necessarily think it'll have a completely satisfying ending because there are so many parts and pieces within this series moving in tandem, so many plot lines tangentially working together. I don't know, we'll see, but so far the series has been wonderful. It'll be about 13-14 volumes in length. Volume 12 just came out in Japan, and I think we've collected almost all the chapters that are out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing the series. It's one that I enjoy a lot. I'm going to be sad when it's over, and I don't think that it's going to be like a perfect ending with everything tied up in a neat little bow. But this series really has wonderful pacing. It's really compelling. It grabs you, and then it has enough mystery to keep you engaged, but it doesn't drag out mysteries or questions for too long. There's quite a quick turnover rate insofar as like something mysterious happening or characters trying to figure something out, and then they'll get their answers quite quickly, and then from that we get more questions, but it's not like an irritating sort of thing that other series sort of do. The pacing in this is great. I think that's one of the best aspects of this series, and if you didn't like the anime, that's probably because of what they focused on, but also the pacing. I think the pacing for the anime was atrocious. So if you did like the anime and were wondering about the manga's even better. And I'm not usually one to say like, oh, one format is greater than the other, but I really didn't like the anime, although I am biased. I'm a manga reader. My friend who I was watching it with, she enjoyed it, so, you know, all hoops and roundabouts, as they say. So yes, it's really a interesting story, one that I think is still under a lot of people's radar, but it's really good if you like sort of these like monster minority in society and prejudice and you know, self-prejudice and how we see ourselves, and like trying to break through those societal barriers and that sort of thing that have been done a bajillion times in media, manga, movies, books, whatever else. But I really like the plotting. I like the diversity in this series. I think it's really interesting. And then yeah, it's a great manga. I'm gonna be sad when it's over, but until then, I've still got another couple chapters to read, and I'll be happy. Then another great series from Vertical, we have volume 13 of What Did You Eat Yesterday by Fumi Yoshinaga. Really one of my favorite mangaka of all time. I adore her work, and this series is no exception to that. Volume 13 is just more of the same greatness. I really, really, really like this volume in particular. I've said this before in regards to this manga. It's definitely like a foodie manga. It's, if you like cooking, or if you like, you know, food manga that isn't just like for the flashy competition-y type of stuff like Food Wars and that. If you have an interest in cooking and meal preparation and that sort of thing, like a lot of Yoshinaga's stuff seems to like linger on antique bakery and not love but delicious foods, this is right up your alley. If you like things like Oshunbo, if you like, you know, there's a lot of food manga out there. This is one of those where it is definitely for people who like making food. This manga is probably a solid 70% recipe. So yeah, it's not one to go into expecting like a huge amount of plot, insofar as like conflict or anything else. It's a very soothing and methodical manga in that sense. But for that 30% that isn't just like making a meal and sitting down and eating it and describing in great detail how we slice things and cook things and fry things, I really love this manga. It's probably the quintessential example of how to write a domestic relationship. The main characters in this manga, the gay couple who live in Tokyo, one's a lawyer, one is a hairdresser, and they're not young guys. There's a there's a funny bit in this manga about how one of them is his birthday, and he's like, oh, I want to celebrate our birthdays together because we didn't have the opportunity to celebrate your birthday last year. And it's like initially this, oh, that's so sweet, but they're just like, no, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to drag me into my 50s like you are. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be 49 forever. And I laughed so hard because it is that, like, it has this really, really realistic domestic vibe of how actual people in relationships interact with each other. You do tease each other. You do have these, like, ongoing little bickering, you know, sessions. But at the end of the day, you care about each other. And this manga, in particular, really focuses on that, on, you know, fostering the relationship you have with your partner or your family or your friends through having a meal together. It's time you share with each other, not only to enjoy good food, but to discuss the day, to, you know, talk about problems or to grow closer. And I think that truly is why this manga is so wonderful. There are so many really good chapters in this manga. I find Yoshinaga's humor really funny. Maybe that's not like a great indication of my humor, but this series is really funny when it needs to be. I really like, again, the relationship dynamic between the two main characters and the other characters as well. And I really like food and cooking, so and I really love Fumi Yoshinaga. So this manga's, you know, sort of made for me. It's not one for everyone, but I do recommend it if you are looking for a more soothing, like, seinen series about cooking and that sort of thing, and family and domesticity and acceptance as well, and sort of perspective and getting older. I really like the fact that our main characters aren't like 20-somethings or in, you know, just business guys. Because again, when you have like gay main characters, a lot of people just immediately jump to, oh, it's a BL, oh, it's a yaoi, when really this isn't that at all. That aspect is, it creates conflicts or it creates situations within the manga itself, but it's not like focused on that. It's more so just like okay, well, we're following these people, but it could be any, you know, couple within any major city or anywhere, you know. It doesn't have to be a gay couple in Tokyo. It could be, you know, a married couple, you know, 40 years married in, yeah, the middle of Italy. Like, it could be anywhere, because that's what the feeling fosters. I mean, the recipes would be different, but yeah, it's not reliant on like, oh, it has gay characters, therefore that's why you should read this manga. Yeah, I talk way too much about this series every time it comes up, but it is one that I really, really love, and I don't think enough people are reading it because they're either don't know about it or they're off-put about, like, the recipes or something. I don't know. I think it deserves more interest, and if you haven't heard of it before, maybe check out a couple volumes, either through your library or, you know, however you do that. It's really good. And volume 14 will be in 6 months or a year or whenever, and I will probably spend another 8 minutes talking about it. But yeah, it's really wonderful. This and Oku are the only ongoing Yoshinaga titles we have in English, and they're both really, really good, really, really different though. And yeah, I'm just blessed because I love Yoshinaga, and we have so many of her titles available. Check them out if you haven't, because she has a lot of great stuff. Next, we have the Yen Press stuff, and most recent volume of Black Butler, volume 26. This manga, this volume, reveals something. There's a great revelation in this particular volume that I was sort of spoiled for because the chapters themselves have been out for a while, and when anything huge happens in manga, you hear a lot of buzz from everywhere about it. But yeah, there's major things happening in this volume. I think Black Butler, as I've said before, is a series that has sort of a bad rap. It's not a perfect series, it's not for everyone, and I do understand why a lot of people have the perception of it that it has. It definitely has a very vocal, like, fan base of particular, like, fangirl, and I personally don't really have an issue with that. I think that everyone's allowed to enjoy whatever they want in whatever way they deem fit. But I don't subscribe to a lot of, like, the fangirly tendencies of pushing, like, the Fujo filters onto the series. Toboso definitely plays up to it in certain aspects, but don't go into this, or don't just think of this as, like, oh, it's just, like, Fujo bait. It's really not. It's really, like, it can get quite dark. It's a shonen, like, supernatural mystery action. I've said before, I do have some issues with how well balanced the series is in terms of, like, the dark drama stuff and then the lighthearted humor, but without the humorous aspect of it, the dramatic parts wouldn't hit nearly as hard. And oh man, the dramatic parts hit pretty dang hard in this volume. Oh, some of this, as I said, some of this stuff that happened in this manga I am aware of, or have somewhat aware of, but I didn't know the circumstances. I just knew part of the reveal. And even in saying that, like, there are other things that happen in this volume that, like, hit really hard. I was like, oh no, oh no. I didn't really, I knew this was coming because the reveal was coming because I knew what chapters roughly it happened in, so I knew it was coming soon, and I sort of knew it would be in this volume. But, oh man, this series really feels like it's hitting its peak, it's hitting its end. I feel like it'll wrap up probably before 30 volumes. I don't know, it might be totally off, but this feels like the end stretch for Black Butler, and I'll be happy when it's over. I think it has lived a really good life. I think it's reached a lot of its potential, and I am looking forward to seeing how the series wraps up. I'm still a little bit, like, speechless about how to talk about this volume without spoiling anything, but if you're a Black Butler fan, you probably already know what happens if you follow the Yen Press, like, simulpubs, or if you follow the scans. I don't. So, through osmosis of, like, fandoms, I was aware of things, and I'm sure a lot of people are, but this volume is still, like, pretty heavy-hitting, when it counts. And the series as a whole, I think, is pretty, like, it's a fun, interesting series. I like a lot of parts of it. I've said before, it's not a perfect series, but it's one that I don't think deserves the reputation that a lot of people give it. And I personally really don't think the anime adaptations are very good representations of this manga. I think the manga is really very, very good. And yeah, it's ending soon. I can feel it. It's gotten to that point in the story where you're like, well, if you don't end it after this, like, why continue it? It'll be weird when it's over, though, because Black Butler has existed, really, for a long time. And it'll just be weird to, like, finally see an end to this series. Continuing on, we have Volume 4 of the case study of Vanitas by Jun Mochizuki, the same mangaka as Pandora Hearts. This is somewhat like Pandora Hearts was like a Victorian-esque steampunk Alice in Wonderland. This, or Wizard of Oz. Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, all those things. This is same sort of steampunk-esque aesthetic set in France, but also like a vampire story. I really like it. I haven't always followed Mochizuki's work, but I think most people are very aware of it. This is a really interesting volume and interesting series. I really liked how Mochizuki, like, branches out and hints at things throughout her series. It's really one that it takes a while for these volumes to come out, but they are really thick. They're so big. The author's note at the end is like, it's another thick volume, hopefully next one will be smaller. And I said, no, I don't want it to be smaller. I want it to be as thick as you can make them. But it is a really interesting series. I know vampires sort of are done to death at this point. But if you enjoyed Pandora Hearts, I think you'll definitely enjoy this one. Even if you don't, but you like that sort of, or if you haven't read Pandora Hearts. Not if you don't like Pandora Hearts, but if you haven't read Pandora Hearts, but you do like that steampunk-esque aesthetic with like a Victorian era, or, you know, that mid-18th or mid-19th century, 1800s setting, her works are sort of go-to. They're definitely some really interesting stuff, emotional roller coasters, a lot of like pretty interesting characters and all of that, plus action focused. So yeah, I really like her work. This is just another great volume from her. And they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. Let me see if I... And how her art has evolved over time is just beautiful. I mean, looking at these volumes, and even the later part of Pandora Hearts comparatively to the early parts of Pandora Hearts, and man, there is an upgrade. So yeah, if you haven't tried this one out, but you are a fan of Mochizuki, it's definitely worth getting. If you haven't tried any of Mochizuki's work, this is a good one to start with. I don't think it's a prerequisite to, you know, have read Pandora Hearts or anything else to enjoy this one. It's a solid series, and I'm looking forward to more. Another volume 4 with the most recent volume of Aka. This is Natsume Ono's sort of spy thriller, kind of, in the way that Ono could do. It's not... it's very leisurely, and sort of like with Fumi Yoshinaga's work, it's definitely lulls you into this methodical and relaxed sort of day-to-day feeling, although this does develop much more of like a actual plot pretty early on, but it is a little bit slow going. This series is only 6 volumes long, so only 2 more after this, but really great. Again, I'm a big fan of Ono's work. I own every single one of her titles in English available. This series is, I think, one that presents itself as something but ends up as something pretty different. I really like, again, the character work in this. I really love Natsume Ono's artistic style as well. That's something that can be a bit contentious. Some people don't really like her style, but this is a really, really, really well done manga. I'll see if I can... Yeah. With this series, even when it's sort of that more leisurely, laid-back pace, there is always this undercurrent of tension, which is held throughout a lot, like, majority of the first half of the series, and then you learn things, and then, you know, the plot peaks, and lots of other stuff are happening, and then things get, you know, we reach our conclusion. But I have only seen this series via the anime. I'm reading along with the manga, of course. Now, it is a pretty close adaptation, so if you've seen one, you know the story. But yeah, it's nice to have a new Ono manga available, and it's just continues to be great. I don't know how to convince people otherwise, but it is like a pretty interesting spy thriller, sort of espionage story, if you give it the time to establish itself and build up. It does need that time of like suspense and tension. It doesn't just jump straight into it, which I think the best sort of spy media does. So, you know, it's really, really good. Really good. And yet another volume 4 from Yen Press. We have Silver Spoon, Hiromu Arakawa's slice of life comedy, coming of age manga, agricultural manga, set in agricultural school. Wonderful, wonderful series, one that has been a long time coming. This, I think, was definitely like a dream license for a lot of people, and finally we see it thanks to Yen Press. This series, I've said many times, is really wonderful. I think it discusses a lot of problems about like finding yourself when you're a teenager, and like those issues of growing up and realizing what you want to do with your life when you are, you know, this going through a lot of changes in high school. I think Hutchkin, our main character, definitely has a he's ahead in that he is realizing a lot of things about himself and about the people around him that he wouldn't ever have had that perspective just going to a normal high school and not being so completely out of his element. And he's learning so much about not only himself and his friends and, you know, the food industry, agriculture, where our food comes from, but he's learning a lot about like his place and what he wants to do, because he is directionless. That's sort of the main point of why he moved to this school. I also really like in this manga that Hachkin, even though he is like a complete outsider, has no background in agriculture, nothing to do with farms, just a normal city kid. He's never treated like an outsider. I mean, they make jokes at his expense, and everyone's sort of takes advantage of him being like such a smart guy, and you know, the fact that he doesn't realize things, but it's never done with bad intentions. It's more like a teaching opportunity, if that makes sense. Nobody treats him like he doesn't belong, which I think is really nice to see in a manga set in high school, because that's not always the case. They're all very different characters, they all have very different situations, but they all function as a unit within a class. And I think that's definitely an element of you go through hell together, you know, you're closer than anything, because they do have to do these, you know, they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do all of their chores or their, you know, muck out or do club activities. They go through so much physical labor that they are so close. The camaraderie is really genuine in this manga, and that's something that you don't see a lot in like typical high school settings. This manga also has a really interesting element of like having so much respect for your food, even though you know, agriculture, there's a lot of problems with it, with how it's done currently all over the world. There's definitely room for improvement, especially when we are trying to raise animals or grow crops to feed hundreds of thousands of millions of people. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of environmental impact. There's a lot of, you know, ethical dilemmas insofar as how animals are treated and shipped and slaughtered and everything else. But, and to Silver Spoon's credit, it never shies away from discussing those issues. It doesn't have, I mean, it's not going to straight out attack a lot of problems, but it's an interesting perspective coming from someone who has an agricultural background and why they do, like, why things are the way they are right now. But more so to the point is the fact that everything that these kids eat, they have utmost respect for, and they do eat because they don't want the effort that they themselves or the animal or the plant or whatever to go to waste. And I think that's a good way to look at it. I personally don't subscribe to vegetarianism or veganism. I think that's, of course, a personal choice, and you're free to do whatever you want. But I do think there's definitely good discussions to come from those groups, and I don't think it's a bad thing to be either of those things, but I think there's a level of reality that you have to have in regards to changing your own personal habits isn't necessarily going to change anything else in this cycle of industry. And I mean, the fact that circle of life, this stuff happens. You can lobby for better conditions for, you know, agricultural animal, like cows and chickens and pigs and whatever else, as much as you want. And I think that's a great thing to get behind. But I personally wouldn't ever stop eating meat or like dairy products or eggs or anything else like that. But again, personal choice. And I think, I mean, if you are very sensitive to those sorts of things and those sorts of issues, Silver Spoon is maybe not a manga for you, because it does have a lot of that sort of thing, like this celebration of food in its entirety, and in its most pure and raw sense as well. I mean, this is not processed or overly processed foods. We're talking about fresh meats, fresh vegetables, and then minor processed foods like milk, cheese. Eggs aren't processed, of course, but like, you know, it's this idea of a wholesome, varied diet that comes from nature, and with that, Silver Spoon is about these kids who fundamentally have to work with nature for their livelihoods, and so the relationship they have with the world around them, the animals that they are in charge of, that sort of thing. It's really good. I don't think many people would have a problem with this series, but again, if you're sensitive to those sorts of issues, maybe. But I personally really, really enjoy this series. It's obvious that Arakawa has a background in this, has a lot of personal experience, and she draws from it very, very well. Yeah, it's a great series, and I'm looking forward to volume 5. I think this series is wrapping up pretty soon. Volume 15 came out in Japan just recently, and Arakawa has said that she's planning to wrap it up soon. So I don't know how long in particular this series will be, but we definitely have more to look forward to with it. And finally, we have a Yen on light novel, volume 8 of Baccano, my absolute favorite ongoing light novel series. I say this pretty much every time there's a new volume, but this was my dream license. I just adored the anime adaptation of this, and it seems like we would never get a license for this light novel, just because light novels at the time weren't really a viable market. But things have changed, and oh, how happy I am that they have. This series is still ongoing in Japan. It's got over 20 volumes already, and I don't think it's close to ending. I don't really know. Naruto's other popular work is Durarara. I enjoy aspects of Durarara, but I definitely think Baccano is like much more so the more interesting of his series within this universe. I'm also curious about Vamp. I wish we would get a relicense of that. Long story short, Seven Seas used to have the license but never got it out, and now I think it's just in limbo. It's only 4 volumes long. I would love to get it. But this series, if you know nothing about it, that's a shame, because it is wonderful. It's set in Prohibition era, US. 1934 is this particular volume. And like with all of Naruto's works, it follows a huge, diverse cast of characters who are all really interesting and fun to read about. I haven't read this particular volume yet just because I haven't had time. I've had so many assignments to do. But this is one that I just love. I think that all of the characters are compelling. All of the actual plots are really interesting. The anime adaptation adapted the first 3 volumes, a little bit of volume 4, but generally the first 3 volumes. So with this, we are like way ahead with stuff like this is all new stuff. It has been for a couple of volumes, and it just continues to be great. I can't really say much more than that. Alice in Jail's Prison is the subtitle for this particular volume, and I know some things that go on in this volume, but not really what happens. Like, I know that certain characters are in prison and interact with each other, and I'm interested to read about that, because that's, that's not character interactions I've seen before. So I'm really excited. Yeah, it's a great series. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to try it. It's definitely one that continues to be fun and really like engaging and just this crazy ride full of this crazy characters. As I said, it's definitely my favorite ongoing light novel series. I don't follow a huge amount of light novels. I mean, I do because I write about them, but as for stuff I'm actually actively picking up and reading right away, Baccano is really the only one. I've fallen behind on Durarara. I don't really buy any other like major light novels series currently. So yeah, it's or Spice and Wolf. Spice and Wolf and then Baccano are the two that are like I keep up to date with. Great series. Check it out if you haven't. Definitely probably the best in Yen's current titles. Sure to be enjoyable if you give it a try. So that's everything that I got for this last half of August. Not as much as last pickups, understandably, but still quite a bit. So this month in regards to manga has been huge, although as I said last time, a lot of those were actually purchased like over a year ago and were just held with my proxy. So money spent wasn't actually any more than usual. Yeah, a lot of really, really great titles in here. I would expect a lot of people are following at least maybe one or two of these, hopefully more. But all titles that I really, really enjoy. Things that of all different genres that I can say like I'm really happy to be following and always wants me to read more. It's always exciting getting a new volume, as well as The Key to the Kingdom seems really interesting, a lot of potential there. I do need to get the first couple volumes though to get into it and to actually read it. Again, I apologize for not having a video out last week, mainly because my schedule has been so busy thanks to university, just so many assignments and other things to do. I mean, I've got commitments outside of YouTube, as most people do, so I am going to try and stay with my one video a week, but if I can't do it, you know, just, I'm sorry. These pickup videos will be on time, so you will at least always get, you know, 2 videos a month. Hopefully more, but we'll see. Let me know your thoughts on any of these titles, if you agree with me or you completely disagree with any of my choices or explanations or opinions. I'd like to know. Any titles that I may have missed out on, although I'm fairly up, like I do keep on top of quite a lot of stuff, so you know, we'll see. But I always like reading comments from you guys. I like hearing what you have to say. If you don't want to leave a comment, I do also have a Twitter. I'm on there quite a lot, not all the time, but you can reach me fairly easily there. The link is in the description, as is my Book Depository affiliate link. Don't, you know, no obligation to use it, don't feel like you have to, but if you are using Book Depository like I do pretty much exclusively, that using that link helps me out a little bit. I don't get a huge like commission or anything, but I personally think Book Depository is the best place to buy manga, especially if you're outside of the United States. The shipping is a little bit longer because everything comes from the UK, but they have pretty much every new book available ever for pre-order, and that's not just for manga, that's for typical novels, textbooks, whatever else you need. And the prices are really competitive. Prices there are a lot cheaper than anywhere else, at least for Australia, and they're all in great condition. The customer service there is wonderful too, and you know, I personally think it's just like, if you're wanting to buy manga, especially a large amount of manga, and you are in a country that doesn't always have like huge sales on manga every week, it feels like, that the US does. It's a great option and one that I can get behind 400%. It's, yeah. But thank you so much for watching. Yeah, let me know your thoughts and feelings on anything in this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye till then.